What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video, players not to draft, and this is going to be the first video in a new series I'll be starting where we take a look at my projections in a number of different ways. But this first episode is going to be players not to draft, and for this series, it's really about opportunity. There are a ton of factors that go into drafting and not drafting players, but opportunity is a really big one, probably the biggest factor. You can be extremely talented, but if the opportunity isn't there, then it's going to be tough for you to produce in fantasy. So in this episode, we'll be looking at some players who might not be getting the opportunity that their ADP suggests. And of course, I'm only going to talk about a select number of players, so if you want my full projections to find sleepers and busts on your own, along with my tiered rankings and player write-ups, then be sure to get our draft package. It costs the same as a lunch, guys, and it provides you with more information than most sites in the industry. So head on over, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and check that out. But let's start things off today with the stat of the day. Today's stat: there were 3 wide receivers last season with 40 or more yards in a single rush attempt. 2 of them, Robert Woods and Jarvis Landry. Who was the third? So, who do my projections say not to draft? We're going to start things off with Mark Ingram, currently projected 153 carries for 700 yards, 4.8 touchdowns, along with 20 receptions for another $150 and a touchdown. That gives him the 35th highest projection among running backs, but his current ADP is 24. So I have him 11 spots behind his ADP, and this is one that I agree with. I'm actually not in agreement with all of the projections, and obviously that's how I adjust them throughout the summer. So I'm going to let you guys know which ones I agree with and which ones I think maybe I don't 100% agree with. But this one I'm on board with because this team is going to run the ball a ton, but they also have a ton of running backs and a mobile quarterback. So Justice Hill is going to take away some carries. He's going to take away some receptions. Lamar Jackson's going to take away a ton of carries and some rushing touchdowns. And we have never seen Mark Ingram with a team that isn't the Saints, right? And the Saints, we know, are a prolific offense, especially for the running back position. I mean, you put a good running back on the Saints, and they're going to put up a ton of fantasy points. We've never seen him outside of that situation, outside of Drew Brees and that extremely good running offense and screen game. So we don't 100% know how good of a running back he is. So when you combine that with a questionable opportunity share, I mean, we don't know. He's changing teams. They have other good running backs. We don't know exactly what his opportunity share is. Combine that and also a team that's unlikely to throw very much to the running back position. And I'm not shocked at all that the projection has him as being overvalued right now. So I'm gonna check him off on the list so they do not draft him. Another one's Le'Veon Bell, and he's projected at 286 carries for a little under 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns, along with 57 receptions for 464 more yards and 1.5 touchdowns. That comes in with the 12th highest projection among running backs, and yet he's currently being taken as running back 7. And I do have him ranked as the running back 11, so I tend to agree with this projection, although Bell has a lot more going for him than Ingram does. So where I don't really think Ingram exceeds his ADP, I do think that Le'Veon Bell can return his first to second round, it kind of depends on the draft, first, second round ADP. Bell doesn't have any competition behind him, so his opportunity share is much more locked in than Mark Ingram's. And also, Sam Darnold is not going to, he's going to run the ball sometimes, but like he's not Lamar Jackson. So he's not going to take a ton of rushing touchdowns. He's not really going to take rushing yards. His carries are going to come more on scrambled and less on designed runs. I also really like Sam Darnold. I think he's going to take a nice step forward this season. Not to say that Lamar Jackson isn't, but I do think that that offense is going to get better. So the biggest risk with him is touchdowns, and I think that's why the projection is low, because the last few seasons, the Jets have not scored that many touchdowns, which is why his projection's at 6.5 total touchdowns. So if he can bump that up to, like 10 to 12 total touchdowns, he's very likely to return that first round value. So it's really all about that touchdowns. The 6.5, if you're wondering, is even with a 10% touchdown bump. So my projections have weighted averages from prior seasons to kind of give the overall opportunity for the offense, and then I adjust for offensive coordinators, for positive negative regression, for different quarterbacks, and everything that could possibly change an offense. I gave a 10% bump to touchdowns for the Jets, and that's honestly one of the bigger bumps I've given any team. So it doesn't bode extremely well for him, but I don't think he's a horrible pick. It's just the projections definitely say do not draft, and I also haven't actually taken him in a mock draft since I believe the first mock draft I did the entire offseason. So I likely won't be drafting him, but I understand the case for him. Next guy is Eric Ebron, currently projected 43 receptions for 532 yards and 4.7 touchdowns, and that's the 15th highest projection among tight ends, but he's been taken as a tight end 7. And last season, this is why he's been taken as a tight end 7, 66 for 750 and 13 touchdowns. Only 6 other tight ends have ever had 13 or more touchdowns in a season. So this is the reason he's being taken as tight end 7, because not that many guys even have that in their range of outcomes. Not saying projected wise, range of outcomes. Not that many tight ends can post 13 touchdowns, and of course Eric Ebron can because we just saw it. But like I said, 6 other tight ends have ever posted 13 or more touchdowns in a season, and his 66 receptions were the 3rd least among those seasons. Those tight ends saw a 53% decrease in touchdowns the following seasons, and they weren't flukes. You do have Tyler Eifert on the list, but you've got Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, Vernon Davis twice, and Antonio Gates, and they saw a 53% decrease the following season. So Ebron is not going to catch a touchdown 1 out of every 5 receptions again. I mean, it was an absolutely epic season for Ebron, but he's gonna regress. And not only is natural regressing gonna happen, but they've got Doyle back, they brought in Funchess in free agency, and they drafted Campbell. So with all those new pieces, I agree in saying that he's being overvalued even without doing out any projections, because that feels like a best case scenario. Not that the tight end position is very difficult to end at tight end 7 because there's not that many good tight ends, but he's being a little bit overvalued. So I haven't taken him in any mock drafts, and I don't believe I will be. Next tight end is Jared Cook. His projection, 47 receptions for 633 yards and 3 touchdowns. And this is another projection I slightly disagree with, kind of like Le'Veon Bell. I can see where it comes from. I would have him ranked higher than the projection because of the offense that he's on and the touchdown potential. So I am probably going to look in to why his touchdowns are so low and maybe give it a small bump because, of course, he's playing with Drew Brees. And I already actually have given him a small bump just to get him up to 3. But honestly, the highest I can see it landing is 5. And even at 5, I looked at it, he's still being overvalued. Like, let's not forget that they have Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas taking a massive opportunity share and a massive touchdown share. Plus, I see Traquan Smith taking a step forward this season. So while he's the clear-cut tight end starter, he's going to need those touchdowns because he's not a guy who wins on volume. Remember, last season was his first season over 700 yards since 2011, and his first season in his career over 5 touchdowns. He's going to absolutely have nice weeks. If you want to use him in DFS, then go for it. But it's very, very difficult. Like, you only have 100% to divvy up in the opportunity share. And when you start looking at the other elite weapons they have on the offense, it's pretty difficult to raise his opportunity share. So if I don't see the receptions and the yards going up that much, the touchdowns can really only get so high. So while I don't think he's a terrible pick, he is being overvalued because he's on the Saints, and I just will not be drafting him. Next position on the list is quarterback, and we're going to look at Russell Wilson, currently projected for 3,685 passing yards and 28 passing touchdowns, along with 61 carries for 371 yards and 4.7 rushing touchdowns. That's the 11th highest projection among quarterbacks, but he's being taken as a quarterback 7. And I 100% agree with it. He had an 8.2% touchdown rate last season, which is going to regress, and every report indicates they're going to continue with their run-heavy approach. So the passing volume is going to remain low, and the touchdown rate is going to decline. Also, Wilson used to be able to save you in fantasy with his legs. Remember earlier in his career, even if he didn't throw for that many, he didn't throw for that many touchdowns, yards, or anything, he was able to save you with good rushing performances, but the designed runs have been really low in recent years, and it doesn't look like he's going to return to those 100 carry days, especially with the passing volume so low. Because you could argue that if the passing volume went up, then he's going to have more scrambles because he's really good at scrambling. That's where he gets a lot of his yards. But if they're running the ball a ton, that takes away a lot of the scrambles. So the volume just doesn't look like it's going to be there, and he's going to have to win on efficiency, which he can do. but he was already hyper efficient last season, and it's obviously not going to get better than it did last season, so I just can't recommend drafting him. Quarterback number 2, Matt Ryan, currently projected 4,605 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, and then just 30 carries for another 100 yards and a touchdown. That's the 14th highest projection among quarterbacks, but he's going as the quarterback 6. And I feel like we do this, I feel like people do this every time with Matt Ryan. Every single year he goes late, except the year after he has a good season. He's like the ultimate recency bias quarterback. The dude has a mediocre season every year of his career. Then he goes off, and then he goes as the quarterback 6. And then he's normal again, so people draft him late. And then he goes off again. Oh, it's quarterback 6 again. Like, every single time. It's incredible. He adds nothing with his legs. So he's going to need another 4,900-yard, 35 touchdown performance to pay off. And I have more confidence that Matt Ryan can prove me wrong than Wilson, but I just don't see it. There are so many quarterbacks this season that are going to crush him on the ground that he's going to need to hit his ceiling, which he can do. He hit his ceiling last year. He could do it again. But I don't want to draft a player who needs to hit their ceiling to pay off. I want to draft a player who only needs to hit their median projection to pay off. So since that's not the case with Matt Ryan, it's a no for me. Last position, wide receiver, and we're going to start things off with Jarvis Landry. Projected 78 receptions, 886 yards, and 4.6 touchdowns. That's the 30th highest projection among wide receivers, but he's coming off the board as wide receiver 21. And this is entirely a problem of opportunity. I really don't see a way that his projection can increase much. I mean, maybe it goes up a little bit, but it really can't get much higher than this because you look at everyone around him. And plus, I have Baker Mayfield with the highest passing yardage projection at just over 4,800 passing yards. So that's not the problem. I cannot bump up Baker Mayfield anymore in the passing yards, and Landry still only gets 886. Things could go up a little bit if Duke Johnson gets traded, but you've got Odell, Njoku, Chubb, Duke on the roster. There's only so much volume to go around. Remember, I have 100% to divvy up, and I've given him a solid chunk of that, and there's still just not enough. There's not enough to go around. So he's very likely to see less targets than he did last season. And even with those targets last year, he wasn't able to go over 1,000 yards. He still only managed 4 touchdowns. So he's only going to exceed value if Odell gets hurt. With my mid-round pick, I don't want them to only exceed value if the guy ahead of them gets hurt. They need to have a path to break out even without injuries. And that's just not the case with Jarvis Landry. So Jarvis is a no for me. And the last player on the list is Golden Tate. Projected 64 receptions, 805 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's the 49th highest projection among wide receivers, but he's currently going off the board as the wide receiver 38. And this is another outcome I completely agree with. I really can't see Golden Tate exceeding the stat line. I mean, this is going to be a terrible offense, and he plays a similar role as some already established players in the offense. He's at best going to be the 4th option in the passing game on one of the worst passing games in the league. And yet people are taking him as the wide receiver 38. Like, he's not on the Lions anymore. He's not on the Eagles. He's on the Giants. Like, he's my wide receiver 50, and I'm perfectly comfortable now. We do not draft the 4th option in the passing game on the worst passing game in the league. It's just not something that we do here. So that's the list. And remember, you can download all of my projections and my rankings on our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, how about giving us a like? And how about subscribing if you're new to the channel? But thanks for watching.